YouTube? This is Justin, aka Demonic Sweaters, here with a product review, sorta. I'm just here to talk about the Korg MicroKorg. Now, the Korg MicroKorg is a pretty old synthesizer at this point that's still in production. And why is that? It's because it's pretty awesome. This thing has been around since 2002. It was first produced back then, but to really understand where the MicroKorg is coming from, go back to 2 years before that, and there was a synthesizer by Korg called the MS2000. The MS2000 was a much larger synth, and it had a crazier looking panel on the front of it. However, the synthesizer engine, which is DSP technology, to create analog emulation, analog modeling, the synthesizer, the MS2000, had the same exact engine inside of it as the MicroKorg. So 2 years after they made the MS2000, they put together the MicroKorg and they shrunk down everything and put it inside this tiny little package. And since then, this has become one of the most popular synths of all time. A lot of people buy the MicroKorg as their first synth because it's small in size, it's affordable, it's well built, and it just sounds really awesome. One of the things that I've noticed though is since the MicroKorg is so small and inexpensive, a lot of people seem to have the misconception that it's not a good synth. This really is not true at all. In fact, the only reason why a lot of people end up having a negative feeling about the MicroKorg in general is because they never really learn how to program it. Now, programming the MicroKorg is not the easiest thing in the world, but neither is programming any synth for that matter. In fact, I have some synths here that are much harder to program, like the K1 that's sitting down below. They're a lot harder to program than the MicroKorg is. Once you understand the programming of it, you can really do a lot with it. So it's really cool. What I want to do is show you guys some basic programming, and then I'm going to create a song entirely on the MicroKorg. Okay, so as I was saying before, that the MicroKorg is really an incredible synth, but not only is it a synth, it's also a vocoder. And what you heard in the intro of the video was me speaking into the vocoder microphone, which is, if I just set it on the vocoder setting right here, I can do some more. So yeah, vocoder basically takes a signal into the synth itself and then allows you to play. So as soon as I talk into the mic, you're going to hear the processed sound. So a vocoder takes the signal of your voice, puts it into the synth, and then processes it like a synthesizer. So that is one of the great features of the vocoder. The MS2000 was able to do this as well. There's also a built-in arpeggiator, which what that is basically you have these type of patterns that repeat, and you can add different notes to them. So yeah, it has a built-in arpeggiator. It also has a built-in analog style filter, and what that means is you can do things like this. Where you get that sweeping sound, and that's a filter. And then there's also a full mixer, there's built-in effects, there's delay, there's LFOs. LFO stands for a low frequency oscillator, and it is a way to modify the sound over a time using another oscillator. And oscillators, speaking of oscillators, the synthesizer has two sound generation oscillators, and these are capable of creating a multitude of different types of waves that you can use as the base for your sound and process them within the synth. It has two voices that can play simultaneously. Korg refers to these as timbres, and the timbres can be stacked, and then when you stack them, you can have two sounds playing together. Basically what that means, you can have the two oscillators playing at the same time, or you can have one going by itself. So what I'm going to do is switch the camera over to give you a better view of the actual surface of the synth, and I'm going to go ahead and program some sounds so you can see how to do it. Okay, so there's two basic approaches to creating your own patches on the MicroKorg. One is to start with an existing patch, like the one I have here, and the other is to create one totally from scratch. So in this example, what I'm gonna do, and I think it's a better way to learn the synth, is to actually create one totally from scratch. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do before you can even start to edit any patches on the MicroKorg, well, you can edit them, but they won't save unless you turn off the write protect feature. Now to do that, all you have to do is hold down the shift key right here under the LCD and then press the number 8. And then this where it says, somehow that stands for write protect. This is the one thing that's a little bit hard to understand with MicroKorgs is just what these letters actually mean, because they rarely look like what they're supposed to say. But that, I guess, is a W, and that's a T, and that's a P for protect. And so what you do after that is you turn this until it goes to off, and then you just press the number 8 again. And now write protect has been turned off. Okay, so in order to start programming from scratch, what you're going to need to do first is initialize the program. Now what you do to do this, and what that means, it's basically going to wipe out the patch that is set there. So we won't have this anymore. I'm gonna get rid of that, and then we're gonna have a blank slate to start with. And in order to do this, all you do is you just hold down the shift key again, and you press number 3 on the keyboard. And then once you do that, you press the number 3 again, and now, just a blank single oscillator sound. Okay, so once we get to the initialized sound, the basic approach to creating sounds is to think of this as a matrix. And in fact, that's what this is. It is a matrix. So we have two knobs here. These are our editing menus, edit select number 1 and edit select number 2. And then across this way, we have all the parameters for all of those different settings. Now, if we zoom in close here on the edit select knobs, all of the menus that are in white are for the synth sections, and all of the menus that are in green are for the vocoder sections. And they basically do the same type of thing. So you have two main menus that you work from, and then you work across the matrix here to adjust the parameters for those particular menus. So the first menu we're gonna mess with here is voice. We just turn our knob 1 down to voice here, and we look over here on the top menu, and we see voice right here. If you read this across this way, you can see what all of these parameters, what all these knobs will do for each section of that voice. So right here, this first option tells us that it's going to be a synth or a vocoder patch. So we want this to be a synth patch, and then you can see right here, it just displays SYT for synth. And then if we go over again to single layer or double layer, or single or layer rather, we can do a layered sound, which is going to be both oscillators together, or a single sound, a single oscillator rather. And the difference being with those, the layered sounds, you get more depth to your sound because you're using two oscillators, but you also get less keys you can play at once. The maximum keys you can play at once on a MicroKorg is 4, and that means it's 4 voice polyphony. And if you have both layers enabled, then you only get 2. So we're gonna do a single layer, and then we're going to go over to voice assign. And this tells us if it's going to be a unison, a mono, or a polyphonic sound. And what that means, unison, if you're using a layered sound, it plays both oscillators together, and so you can detune them and do some cool effects and stuff with them. Polyphonic sound means that you can play multiple notes at once, and monophonic sounds means that you can only play one note at a time, which is useful for leads and basses and things like that. So, but for this example, I'm gonna go ahead and do a polyphonic sound. Our last two parameters in the voice section don't really do anything for this particular setting. So we're gonna move on to pitch. And if we just look at the same here, we can look straight across the menu like we did before. We have transposed, tune, portamento, bend range, vibrato. And I'm going to, let's see, I think the only one I wanna mess with here is vibrato. So let's see what we sound like already. And as you can see, this is determining how strong the vibrato is according to the mod wheel. So if we have, you can get really strong or just light. So I want it to be, I don't know, somewhere in the middle I think is good. Okay, and that's all I'm gonna change there in that particular setting. And now let's just move on to our oscillators. So oscillator 1 is the only one that we're gonna be messing with now. And if we just look at our menu again, this is where we can select our type of wave. And if we just scroll through them, you can hear the differences in sound. Okay, I'm gonna go with that one. Okay, now if we go to our mixer section, what we can do here is we can blend the different sound sources together. So right now we only have one oscillator, but we do have the option to blend in a noise tone if we want to, because the MicroKorg also has the ability to generate noise as a third type of oscillator that it has. Even though they don't call it an oscillator, but it does generate sound. So if we go here to the third one, you can hear the noise now blended in with the sound. Okay, let's go up to our next option, which is filter. And under filter, we have different types of filter that you can use. So we have high pass filter, low pass filters. And if we move over to the next option under filter, we have our cutoff, or the next two actually kind of work together. We have our resonance and cutoff. So if we turn up our resonance and then start messing with the cutoff, you can hear Now you have to be careful with filters because you can end up creating some distortion if you get this resonance and filter setting a little bit weird. Like that note, for example. Okay, so I'm gonna go with that. Okay, so after we get our filter set the way we want, we can go to filter EG. Now EG stands for envelope generator. Now an envelope is anything that modifies the sound over time, basically is called an envelope. So you can have, a lot of times you'll see those drawings with like, they kind of look like a mountain for synthesizers, and that is usually how you can visualize an envelope. So if we start messing with some of the parameters in filter EG, you can hear how you can use the filter to affect the sound over time. Next we get into our amp section, and the amp is another, basically it's like having a built-in amplifier built into the synth, and it has things like distortion, direct level. Oh, sorry, that was panning there. But you probably can't tell on the camera. But I'm going to turn the distortion down because I don't really want it to be that distorted. Okay, and then we also have amp EG, and it's the same thing with the envelope generator for the filter, except now this is on the amplifier section. So you can affect your amplifier over time with the envelope generator. Okay, so now to move on to the next section, which is the LFOs, in order to make these do something, if you just go to LFO and start fiddling with these knobs, you're not going to hear any difference. The reason for that being is the LFOs are extremely flexible and you need to assign them to something. So in order to do that, what you do is you come down here to patch 1 under edit select 2, you turn this knob until you get to patch 1, and then what you need to do is assign the various parameters of the LFO to different parameters in the synth. Now, that may seem a little bit vague, but basically what this means is you can take the LFO and assign it to the pitch bend, or you can assign it to the filter, or you can assign it to various other aspects of the synth and have the LFO affect those different parameters. So what I'm going to do is assign it to I'm going to do LFO1, which is LF1 by using the first knob, and then I'm going to go here and assign LFO1 to pitch. And then if I start turning the amount, you can hear how the pitch is slowly moving up and down. Now if I were to adjust the speed, oh wait, that's here. Wait, where is it? Oh, speed is in LFO, that's right. So we go back to LFO, and we go to LFO1, and then we select frequency. If I start changing that, you can hear the difference in pitch. But one of my favorite effects for synths is a very slow moving LFO bend, pitch bend. It's kind of like a C6 sound. It's one of my favorite things to do. It gives you this really uneasy feeling, and I just really like it. So anyway, that is pretty much the same thing. Well, actually, no, let's go to, you basically have other channels where you can do different types of assigning LFOs to different sources and destinations. And you have actually 4 patches, and they call these virtual patches in the MicroKorg, where you can assign these different parameters from one input and output, and basically assign them across the different parameters of the synth. And it can get really complicated. And this is where programming the MicroKorg can become pretty advanced. And I'm still not even that good at it, so I'm not going to go too far in depth about that. But what I'm going to do is skip over the rest of those, even though they are pretty much all the same as what we just did. But I'm going to go up to the mod effects. Now, mod effects are things like flange and chorus and things of that nature. So if we look across the board here under mod effects, our first parameter is type, and flange is what I'm going to go with, and that's just FL9, but that's supposed to be a G. And then if we go over again, we have LFO speed. And then if we go over to effect depth, this is where you're going to start to hear it. Now if we go to delay, delay is pretty obvious, it's just a delay effect, but we have the same type of thing. We can do delay type, then we can do amount, the EQ is basically just an EQ. So you have low, high, and mid where you can adjust the parameters of those. But I'm gonna leave it alone. And now I'm ready to write my patch to the memory of the keyboard. So let's go ahead and hold or press the right button. And now we are in A11. So I wanna go ahead and keep that where it is. And now I'm just going to go ahead and press right one more time. And then once it finishes, your patch will be saved to wherever you put it. So let's go ahead and listen. Now if we switch and come back, and there it is. Okay, so hopefully you're able to understand at least most of what I was saying in there. I know sometimes I get a little bit lost for words when I'm trying to explain this stuff to other people, but the main thing to remember when programming the MicroKorg is the two edit knobs are your main menus, and then across the matrix here are your parameters, and all of them are listed. You know, that's what all this writing is. So everything that's on here, if you just look at this first and then go across to the side here, then you'll know exactly what you're doing. And then if you're confused, you know, like one of the things I highly recommend, and everybody should do this that has a MicroKorg, is actually read the manual. Like, you don't have to sit there and read the whole thing from beginning to end, but have it open and in front of you when you're trying to program it, so you don't get frustrated and lost, and that way you'll think the MicroKorg sucks, which it doesn't, and you know, it'll enable you to get the most out of your synth. So have the manual open, and then when you're programming, if you can't figure out how to do something that you want to do, then look in the manual and you'll find it. And it's also a good idea to kind of have in mind what you want to program or a sound type that you want to program before you even start programming the synth. That always helps. All right, so now's the fun part. I'm gonna go ahead and create a song all on the MicroKorg. I'm gonna use Ableton Live to record, because that allows me to create little clips and quick loops that'll enable me to put something together pretty quickly for the video. So I'll probably use some drum loops of mine that I created too, just so I can have a rhythm track to play to as well. So here we go.
This is the internet.